Okay, we're good to go.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. I'll now call this special meeting to order. This is an opportunity for the service delivery review, and I'd ask us to begin with a moment of silence. Thank you, colleagues. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, there are none noted. There are no minutes. We have 4 deputations. Just before we get to them, I'm just going to make a couple of general comments. So the idea today, the opportunity today is to hear from all 4 of our consultants. We have 4 presentations on different aspects of our municipal operations. The idea today is to provide each consulting firm an opportunity to present a summary of their findings. And if we have any particular questions about the content of the material, we're going to give council some time to ask those questions. The idea today is not about debating the particular recommendations or about approving any particular recommendations. What will happen is on December the 8th, staff will come back with a recommendation to council to deal with the content of the reports in one of 2 ways. Either the more routine, less controversial ones will be incorporated into the 2021 work plans, and we will have an opportunity to sign off to those, to approve those when we do the work plans. There are some that are more in-depth and really deal very significantly with policy directions of the townships. That will be on a separate list, and those will come back on an individual basis for us as a council to discuss and debate and to provide further direction. So there will be an opportunity for council to debate all of these recommendations and to have our various perspectives on that heard. Today, it's a little bit different, is to hear from our consultants. I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to read the reports, but this is an opportunity to get an overview, ask any clarifying questions, and then as we move forward, we'll have a chance to debate on the particular recommendations. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, I don't see any. Good. So we will get to the deputations, and I think we're going first with Monteith Brown, planning consultants on the Parks and Recs. Is that correct, Angie? I know we changed the order a little bit, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So whoever is representing Monteith, please, the floor is yours. And I'm going to ask everybody to keep to their time limit because we have 4 different firms and we're going to try to do a half hour for each firm. So whatever time is left after your presentation will be for questions. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell. Members of council, it's nice to see you all again virtually this time, unfortunately, but we're glad to see that all of you appear to be in good health. My name is Anand Desai. I'm with Monteith Brown Planning Consultants. I'm an associate here. Todd Brown of the firm is also on the call. I will run through the presentation. And I'm just going to pull up the PowerPoint in a minute. I'll just ask someone to give me a thumbs up to ensure that it is displayed on the screen before I start. Is it, can everyone see it? Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. So Monteith Brown was tasked with preparing the service delivery review for the Parks and Recreation Department. And what that, I guess, really the recommendations within the service delivery review, as well as our analysis, are aligned with the Township of Selwyn's strategic plan, which directs municipal decisions and operating practices to reflect a progressive and innovative and a sustainable approach. So again, what we're doing is aligning with really your core principles as an organization. Earlier this year, the township received funding from the Provincial Municipal Modernization Program to prepare this service delivery review. It considers service delivery and modernization opportunities. It reviews administrative processes, all to identify opportunities to reduce costs, specifically for services under the purview of the township's Parks and Recreation Department. In particular, the review examines general ways to enhance departmental operating practices, and a specific focus has been placed on the township's 2 arenas, its 4 community halls, its sports fields, and the Lakefield Marina. The terms of reference that was provided to us also specifically requested that we develop or look to developing some preliminary options speaking to the township's potential role, if any, in the Lakefield campground. As you are all aware, the township provides a wide range of parks and recreation facilities. These facilities are and services are highly valued within the community. They provide wide-ranging benefits, including allowing your residents to be healthy through physical activity, contributing to their mental health. We're seeing that through COVID right now. Providing economic spin-offs to the entire township through local spending, as well as there's a tourism aspect to it as well. Building community vibrancy and social connections, and advancing many environmental benefits such as the preservation of green space and resiliency to climate change. Earlier I mentioned the 4 community halls. I would note that since, just as of this year, the township is reassuming operations of the former Sea Scout building in Lakefield. But we are also excluding Memorial Hall, although that is a community space. It does fall under the responsibility of a different department. The Parks and Recreation Department, it compares itself to a peer group of 5 municipalities consisting of Clearview, Greater Napanee, Pelham, Springwater, and Wilmot. Each are urban rural municipalities that span a large geographic territory, and they have similar population characteristics. 3 of those peer group municipalities are indirect service providers, like the Township of Selwyn, in that they offer little or no recreation programming, but instead the focus of their resources lies primarily on building and operating facilities for community organizations to provide those types of programs. So to standardize the comparisons between our benchmarking, we derive data from financial information returns that municipalities are required to submit. And in addition to the peer group analysis, township staff and the consultants, we drew from our experience in other communities across the region and Ontario when we were undertaking our specific assessments. Some high-level results of the benchmarking, just to set some of the context. The peer group benchmarking found that Selwyn's Parks and Recreation Department was one of the strongest performers when it comes to containing costs and staffing. This is largely a result of the department's indirect service delivery model and its committed workforce, which results in lower operating expenditures and a staff complement that is approximately half of the benchmark average, even after we normalize certain peer group outliers, including a municipality that provides an indoor aquatic center. We removed any kind of aquatic staff from that equation to provide an indication generally where the township's Parks and Recreation Department sits in relation to others. The next few slides will speak to the recommendations of the report. I will not go through necessarily the goals or the context behind each of the recommendations, but certainly will, as Mayor Mitchell indicated, in the question and answer period, would be pleased to respond to any questions about them, including the context in which they were crafted. So we'll start broadly with departmental governance and looking specifically at the strong rationale that continues to exist with the township's indirect service delivery model. As your community has a number of organizations, sports organizations, service clubs, and various other partners that have long proven their ability to deliver valuable programs within Selwyn's parks and recreation facilities. The township should continue to explore ways to attract more usage in its facilities using the asset-based community development model that was recommended in the township's recreation services plan, which involves municipal supports being provided, whether those are financial, whether they're in kind, lending your expertise as a corporation, or other types of supports. When it comes to staffing, in order for the township to solely focus upon operating its facilities, it needs to continuously build relationships and find new opportunities with those community-based providers to meet programming needs of the community. This would be best achieved by adding a dedicated staff liaison that could directly and consistently engage with your local organizations to find ways to have them make better use of your facilities, make more use of your facilities. But this staff position could also provide additional support to the department, such as trend tracking, leading marketing efforts, and assisting to help build efficiencies moving forward. We would also continue to advocate that the township follow its organizational policy. That's going to be very important to build succession plans and ensure the right mix of skills are in place with respect to your staff. Customers are seeking greater convenience in the booking and payment process, including for credit card and online transactions. This is kind of speaking to the customer-facing role of technology and how the municipality might be able to capitalize on or respond to those demands. We are suggesting that an RFP be issued for a recreation management software that allows online and more credit card payment opportunities, which would make it more convenient for customers. It would make it more time efficient for your staff in the Parks and Recreation and the finance departments to process and track invoicing, scheduling, that kind of thing. Other operational efficiencies should also be examined. For example, using GPS in your fleet, which can help plan routes, save fuel costs, save time costs. Considering technology oriented to sustainable development or carbon neutral or climate change resiliency. Those technologies in general may have costs upfront, but the hope is over time that efficiencies will be gained and there is a payback to those investments. With respect to park maintenance practices, efficiencies should be sought through a few types of things. One being updating the existing set of parks maintenance standards in working with other departments such as Public Works, as well as your parks and sport field user groups. Exploring options to contract beautification and hanging basket maintenance, along with selected grass cutting, to better deploy departmental expertise. You're a very large municipality, and so there may be elements where outsourcing or contracting out certain services might allow your staff to fulfill other duties in a more efficient manner. And we're also suggesting piloting park naturalization programs within strategic areas of the Douglas Sports Park, Chemung Park, and the Robert E. Young Complex in pursuit of financial and environmental efficiencies. This is not to say that a whole park should be converted to a natural area, but if there are buffer zones or areas specifically in a park where one doesn't need to mow and it could be kept to a certain height, it can promote some naturalization efforts and benefits while reducing time as well for your staff. Expanding upon advertising and sponsorship opportunities by engaging with local businesses to really find the ways to expand this range of advertising. This could be involve advertising across other township facilities such as the marina or in high traffic areas. such as local businesses and restaurants. Increased advertising, again, is hoping to raise awareness and encourage more use of your facilities. Expanding upon the township's tree and bench naming program. Again, that could be a potential revenue stream. Expanding the township's online presence, as well as partnering with local sports and recreation organizations to expand the scope and scale of promotion. Really combining efforts can go a long way. And exploring new or refined advertising packages, possibly as upsell opportunities in terms of, or I guess value-added opportunities. If someone's advertising in a guide, perhaps they get some sort of other advertising means to make it more attractive and increase their reach. Examining the, oftentimes really pricing recreation rentals is based on scans of rates in neighboring municipalities and implying an inflationary increase to historical prices. These are important inputs, but also so is understanding the actual cost that the municipality incurs in operating spaces is very important. The township has quantified its operating cost per hour for arenas, as an example, in the past. So, such an analysis should be continually updated and extended to other facilities so that the township can determine a level of cost recovery that is deemed sustainable and appropriate, that considers, again, your Selwyn specific costs to deliver it. We are suggesting that the township also establish a capital reserve fund for recreation capital repairs and replacements. Certain reserves are already in place proactively that the town does in terms of its ice resurfacers or selected equipment. But we're thinking, again, more from a building standpoint and building equipment standpoint to make sure that if there is a certain investment that wasn't necessarily anticipated, there is at least some money set aside, that rainy day, I guess, example, that rainy day fund that allows you to kind of minimize your impact on your current year tax, or really, again, just represents good, sound asset management planning. Continuing to update, implement and update your long-range planning. We understand that your municipality has been very successful in implementing and securing grant applications, and we believe that it is a result of your proactive efforts in planning. So updating the rec services plan by the year 2023 is recommended. Continuing to investigate purchasing cooperatives, improving snow clearing operations through, again, potentially contracting third-party services, equipping departmental vehicles with plows, again, leading to more efficiencies in both cost and customer service. And with respect to the arenas, formalizing an ice allocation and an ice usage policy so that times are being used effectively. Groups are committing to certain hours in the year. It guarantees or it gives you certainty in your revenue streams. Continuing to stagger the arena openings and closing dates, again, to match kind of demand with supply, especially in those early and late parts of the season. And entering into a formal agreement or an MOU with the Lakefield Chiefs, as they are currently users of the Lakefield Arena. In terms of community hall operations, we would suggest looking at optimizing their performance by diversifying rentals and bookings, continuing with the township's community development and outreach efforts to find, again, new uses, and trying to operate halls at or near a break-even financial position. We'd also suggest enhancing marketing efforts to build awareness of the halls and encouraging community groups to pilot programs and services within the halls to get them going. And if they're found to be successful, the township has addressed a community need and help build the strength of the community. A few more slides here. In terms of sport field operations, we're just suggesting, based on that previous recommendation of undertaking true costing analysis, determine whether or not to implement a sports field rental fee for minor sports field users. Other minor users, for example, in the arenas, they pay a fee that reflects and recovers a portion of costs. Currently, sport field rentals are free for minor users. And so we're suggesting, once we understand the cost, determine if and what an appropriate cost might be. With respect to the campground, as we mentioned earlier, we were asked to develop some preliminary options regarding the township's role. And the options that we have developed, one is obviously the status quo. A second option would be going to the competitive market, issuing an RFP or an expression of interest for a new operating agreement. Orca has collaborated with certain municipalities to operate their campgrounds. Peterborough is an example. Self-operate is an option where the township would assume operational control of the campground. And then a final option would be to cease campground operations altogether and convert the land to public parkland. So again, this is something that will need to be studied, these options moving forward. Our report doesn't delve into that specifically in terms of the costs or benefits. It's largely intended to speak to the options. And then finally, with respect to Lakefield Marina, we are suggesting undertaking a marina utilization study that investigates and provides guidance with respect to ways to potentially, look at delivering the retail and concession side in a slightly different manner, whether it's expanded type of range of services, again, whether you might find more value with contracting it out. Reviewing the allocation and the split between seasonal and transient slips. The analysis we conducted found that your transient slips generate more revenue per slip compared to the ones that are booked for the whole season. But again, the seasonal ones are important as well. And then pursuing partnerships or agreements with other levels of government or landowners that operate docks in their lands. Lakefield Marina is under a great deal of pressure in terms of demand. There has historically been strong waiting lists. So with that, I will turn it back. I'll stop the screen share at the moment and turn it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. So we've got a few minutes for questions or comments. I'll start with Sherry. I had her hand up first, Sherry. And then Jerry.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's first of all good to have affirmation that our staff are doing a good job. We know that, but it's good to hear it from someone else. I'm sorry to see that the marina utilization study wasn't included in this study. I think expansion of the marina could provide and bolster economic development, and the campground could be included in that and provide another option as it relates to the campground. Expanding marketing and advertising is a great idea, but with the pandemic, the appetite for our local business to be spending additional money at this point in time when things are tough, I think the timing's not right now. When things start picking up, maybe it would be a good idea to pursue, but looking at additional staff right now, I question that. And that's the extent of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Jerry?
Trying to sort out my notes here. With regards to recommendation 11, hang on. There, rather than holding down the space bar. Recommendation 11. We know our true costs on the arenas. You're correct, but are you suggesting that we don't know our true costs on everything else?
Yeah, I mean, and Mr. Vance may speak to this in greater detail, but what we're suggesting, it's similar to what you did to the arena. I don't know that the same level of analysis has been completed for the halls, for the sports fields, for example, for your marinas to quantify it on a per hour basis. We certainly know the aggregate costs of certain facilities. But really, the true cost not only looks at the direct cost of operating facilities, but also would make certain assumptions and look to quantifying certain indirect costs. And so it's important to just make sure there's a methodology that's consistent that one could replicate in the future as well, to, I guess, really arrive and make decisions about what it does cost on an hourly basis.
Okay, thank you. And I've just got one more, if I could. With regards to the, I guess it's on page 33, you make note, third paragraph down, that recreation staff are equipped with hand shovels. And it says to address customer concerns and potentially mitigate liability issues. I understand the liability, but I'm just wondering how many concerns have come in. This is going forward for me down the road, not today, but how many concerns came in?
Oh, I don't know that I'd be able to quantify this, but we have, in speaking with your staff, both frontline and through the management team, it really is during those kind of heavy snowfall periods when public works is otherwise occupied. Staff in the facilities here sometimes, during those periods, that it was a slippery walk, or they're trudging through snow to get into the buildings.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry, Donna?
Yes, through you to a couple of people. I think I'll address this first one to Mike. It's the community recreation liaison position. Have you replaced Tiffany in her maternity leave? Because I've asked before, and it was in the middle of COVID, and they didn't have a person. But it was my understanding that she does a lot of this marketing, and we have our boards are pretty much marketed to the limit. And my concern is that we can't really ask our community members to do much more for us. So first of all, I guess it's a two-part question. Is there somebody in Tiffany's position right now?
Mike?
Mike?
Okay, sorry, the space bar was not working. My apologies for that. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, initially Megan had been hired in her as her replacement, and then when COVID started and we had to reduce the number of bodies in the office, she was laid off, but she has been rehired now. She's only working from here for a couple days of the week, but now that she's done at the marina, and that we're busy in the arenas, she has been hired in that role again.
And just to follow up, Mike? Mike, you still there?
Yes, I am.
Doesn't she do a lot, or Tiffany did anyway, a lot of our marketing? She did a lot of booking.
Tiffany and I certainly did a lot of that. I would typically make the first outreach, and then she would typically do the admin stuff and be the place where calls and costings and whatnot would be sent out or questioned about. I think it's more the marketing with user groups that Monty Brown saw the biggest gap. Being out there on the street all the time and finding out who are the fitness instructors, who are the taekwondo instructors, who are the book club groups, and get those rentals. Those are ones that are tough. And the great thing is that same person then can touch base and say, hey, would you like to advertise? Well, because we could probably get you a few more members to your group, or we could help you build your business. So it's those sort of business outreaches, I think, that they were largely referring to, even more than having Tim Hortons buy another rink ad or something like that. But we are doing well, and the advertising money has gone up each year for the last 4 years. But we have 5 positions out of 22 being sold right now. So we would be okay with a few more advertisers, but I couldn't agree more than with both you and Sherry about now probably not being the very best time, but because this is a report that has more than just 1 year's life cycle, I think that's what it speaks to. But yes, now would be a very insensitive time to be pushing that too hard.
I have a couple more, Andy.
Yeah, okay.
To the end.
If you could ask them very quick, ask them both and then we'll answer them because we're on a really tight timeline today.
Okay. This is quick. It's just regarding the beautification and hiring people to do it. I believe that is only done in Lakefield. The Smith people, Bridge North people and the Lakefield people do hire their own people for watering. And the other thing I didn't understand was the memorandum of understanding with the Lakefield Chiefs. How would that benefit us?
And then,
Yeah, so through you, Your Worship, with respect to an MOU or an agreement, currently they're tenants in your facility. However, I guess a formalized agreement would be helpful to clarify the roles, the expectations of each party, particularly when it comes to, who's sharing costs within the facility around certain things around allocation. So it's just really, it's not to say that what is in place is not working right now. It's saying it's somewhat more informal in nature at the moment, and we would suggest formalizing it in writing with the chiefs.
Okay.
and Donna made a point about the responsibilities are different in different wards. So, right?
For the watering. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Anita?
Okay, I'm just going to make it really quick. I just want to thank you for the extensive and exhaustive report. I think a lot of the recommendations are very good. And as our mayor pointed out, in our 2020 work plan, I guess we're kind of going after the low-hanging fruit. And with regards to the campground, I'm sure that when people have the opportunity to provide their input, we're going to get some really good feedback. So thanks for the good report.
Thank you. Jerry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, if I could just real quick to Anand. Was there a rough draft provided, and what date was the final draft provided?
So through your worship to Councillor Heron, yeah, we've been working through the drafts with our steering committee of the management team. The current draft that was submitted, I believe, was November the 11th, and so our first draft was provided to staff back in September for them to just vet our information, make sure our inputs were correct, and have subsequent discussions about the report.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Anand. Appreciate that, and we will be back to those recommendations either through the work plan process or on one-offs that come to council. So thank you very much for your work. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, members of council.
Thank you. We will now move on to our second presentation, which I believe is on the water and wastewater. Is that correct, Angie?
Actually, I think it's the landfill is the next one.
Okay. Sorry about that. We are on to our landfill, which is from Cambium. And who is going to be presenting?
Hi
Dave?
there, through you, Mayor. I'm actually going to be presenting. My name's Heather DeZerko. I'm the project manager with Cambium, and Dave is here as well if we have any additional questions at the end of the presentation.
Welcome and thank you. And I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay, great. I'll just share my screen here. We better start at the top. Okay, can everybody see that? Yes, excellent. Okay, thank you very much for having us here today to do this presentation. As I mentioned, my name is Heather DeZerko and I'm a project manager with Cambium. We met with staff in July to sort of discuss the objectives of the project and to identify the goals that we wanted to achieve. And those goals were identified in line with the strategic plan as well, to be progressive and sustainable, as well as environmentally responsible. We wanted to look at reducing, if we can, net costs for waste management, decrease waste per capita, increase waste diversion, and optimize system operations. So we did a site visit in August, and the site was very well organized and very well maintained. So I just wanted to mention that. The approach to the study involved 4 phases. One was a review of current programs and practices. We evaluated the performance of those programs. We conducted a review of the financial costs of programs and developed and prioritized options that would meet the goals of the study. So as you're likely aware, there's a number of programs that are offered. There's one waste disposal site in Selwyn Township, which is the Smith landfill site. So the site receives garbage for landfill, construction demolition waste, which is diverted from the waste stream and recycled. There's leaf and yard waste, which is received on site and decomposed and then used as alternative cover. A small amount of that, as I'll mention later, does go to the Harbor Road composting facility in Peterborough for composting. There's brush on site, which is chipped and uses alternative daily cover, scrap metal and refrigerant appliances, which are diverted from the waste stream, tires, household batteries, electronics, blue box waste, and hazardous waste, which are also diverted. The electronics and blue box are administered by the county, but they are managed significantly by township staff on site, or delivered by the township staff. And then the hazardous waste program at the Smith waste disposal site is administered and operated by the county. So the township has limited involvement in that program. We also reviewed some of the administrative procedures for managing the Smith landfill site, including the software program they have for recording visits and types of material that are received at the site, site transactions, site passes, and communication on site. So just a high level, some of the things that we mentioned in the report. The site is 15.8 years of capacity remaining at the end of 2019. So it's probably closer to 15 years now. The diversion rate is between 37 and 53%. And the reason for those 2 different diversion rates, we look at all material diverted from the landfill, but also a lot of municipalities just report the residential waste diversion rate because that is what they receive funding for from the provincial government, and that right now is administered by the county. So as part of the review, we had site staff actually do some waste audits for us to help identify the kinds of material that are going into the waste stream. And this helps us identify maybe areas that could be improved. The audits did indicate that most residents aren't using clear bags yet, which is something to note. And also that the amount of residential waste is probably about 10%, maybe a little bit higher coming to the site. And compaction is meeting standards, but we did note that there was a significant tonnage of like cover material that's potentially being placed into the landfill. So I wanted to point out, as part of our evaluation, we looked at the number of residents coming to, or customers coming to the landfill site. So staff actually tracked this on site, and we divided the number of vehicles by the hours of operation in that particular month. And you can see from the table that even in the winter months, which are typically less busy, you're still seeing on average 10 customers per hour, which is a lot. And in the summer, the number of customers per hour get quite high, up to 29 customers an hour, which is busy. So that's good that you're having good utilization of the hours on site. We also did a financial analysis. As part of this, we actually ran a model. It's from the Continuous Improvement Fund, but it helped us to identify the value of landfill space. And basically it includes reference to the full life cycle costs of the landfill. So startup costs, which were estimated. So there were some assumptions that were made, but also the post-closure costs and monitoring. So the full cost of operating that site through its life cycle per ton of waste that goes in there. We also looked at overall waste management costs. So because Smith Landfill Site is the only site in the township that's receiving waste, we just wanted to see how the other costs associated with waste management were related to the landfill costs. And then these costs on this slide are specific to operating the site. And just to highlight that, you know, the main costs associated with operating the landfill site are labor, and that's not unusual. And based on sort of what I explained earlier, your site is being well utilized for the hours of operation that it is open. Another program that is a significant cost is construction demolition material. And just note that that program is also worth the expense based on the amount of waste that it's diverting from the waste stream. So it's a very positive program that you have operating there, and we feel that that should continue as well. So always when we're talking about landfill sites, we have to talk about tipping fees. The Smith Waste Disposal Site minimum tip fees are currently $3.50 per load up to 50 kilograms, or $100 a ton. A lot of other municipalities that we looked at have minimum fees as well, and they typically range a little bit higher, from $5 to $20 per load. So we recommend at a minimum increasing that minimum tip fee to $5 per load. So that's equivalent to 50 kilograms at $100 per ton. Weight-based fees range from $95 per ton to $160 per ton. The adjacent townships had the lower tipping fee rates, as well as currently City of Peterborough rates are $95 a ton. But those will be going up in the future. So tipping fees are something that Selwyn Township's going to want to look at the landfill site. Many municipalities also have fees for unsorted materials. And so what that is a tip fee if a customer comes into the landfill site and they go to the landfill and they dispose of material, and there's a large proportion of cardboard or construction demolition material that they don't sort into the appropriate locations, they could be charged an additional fee for that. So that's common included in the municipal comparison group that we included. And Kawartha Lakes actually also uses that to enforce their clear bag program. So residents who come into the landfill site with more than 10% of their load black bags or opaque bags would be asked to pay the additional fee if they wanted to dispose of their garbage bags. So that provides an option, I guess, as opposed to just refusing a customer who didn't have their waste in clear bags. So I've summarized all the recommendations on one page. One is to encourage diversion of leaf and yard waste. So because the material received at the Smith landfill site hasn't met composting standards in the past, and it is a lot of work to compost leaf and yard waste to meet regulatory requirements. Trying to encourage that material to be mulched on property or diverted to, say, the Bensford landfill where it would be composted would be beneficial. Additionally, we're recommending an RFP for brush chipping and to increase the frequency of services provided for brush chipping so the brush pile isn't as large. It's been noted on a few occasions that there is a large brush pile there, which has recently been chipped, but something to make note of. There's also the opportunity to investigate wood chip giveaway. So wood chips may be provided to the public to use as ground cover or other municipal departments. This would involve some coordination and effort from the site staff to determine materials that were suitable and to track the quantities of material being provided in this, but it is an option for consideration. As well, during the site visit, one thing that may assist with reducing the amount of cover materials being used on site is to replace the packer wheels. They are quite worn, and changing the packer wheels would basically increase the compaction and the breaking of the waste that's landfilled and reduce airspace. So that would be of benefit as well. And along with that, enhanced tracking of cover material. So the site staff do a great job of estimating and tracking how many loads of cover material they're using. We did have to make some assumptions on the density of that material when we were doing the study. So it would be helpful to have some additional weights and some additional tracking done to confirm the tonnage of cover that's being used at the site. Additionally, it was noted through conversations with staff and through review of the software program that the software program doesn't allow for the export of reports to a usable format like Excel. So there's a lot of manual transporting of data into a usable format. So it would be beneficial to upgrade the landfill software program at the site. There are additional benefits with software upgrades or new software that could help you better identify the number of residential versus commercial customers coming to the site. Also allow you to sort of identify, customers that are issues or from other jurisdictions that are trying to access the landfill. It can provide the ability to upload data directly to the network. So if you do pursue an internet connection at the site, new landfill software would be able to connect with the network. You would have all the information available, and it could actually integrate with your accounting system as well. Along the same lines as the previous service delivery, the acceptance of credit cards is a service that would benefit the public. So a lot of people nowadays don't carry cash and they prefer to use credit cards. So that would be beneficial. There is a cost associated with that, but it is a service and a convenience to the public. And the cost is relatively low comparatively. Additionally, it could reduce some administrative burden with setting up accounts. There are accounts right now for commercial customers if they apply. It can reduce the amount of invoicing and number of customers that use that system. And as I mentioned, the internet may be feasible to connect at the Smith landfill site in the near future, which would provide some benefit in terms of connectivity to the township office and the network, as well as provide an increased speed for processing transactions. So you do have a lot of customers there in the summer, and if you had the ability to use the credit card on internet connection, right now it's dial-up, so it's a bit slower. That would speed up the rate that you can get your customers to the site. And as I mentioned earlier, a progressive increase in tip fees to meet those proposed at the Bensford landfill site is being recommended in the report. As I mentioned previously, there's a few other things that we're recommending you continue the current program, which are very beneficial. One is the construction demolition program. The limited organics program, we did look at collecting organics in the municipality, but given the current circumstances, we recommend continuing with promoting the backyard composting and waste reduction initiatives, and waiting for a county-wide or city organics program to make a decision on your next steps for organics. And existing hours of operation, seem to be very effective and providing a good level of service. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of really slow periods, so no need to really reduce the hours of operation at the site. So that would be a summary of the report, and I appreciate the opportunity working on that for the township, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Heather. I see Donna and Sherry, you're not on my screen, so I don't know if you have your hand up or not, but Donna, you start.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Heather, for the presentation. And I find all your recommendations to be very reasonable and not too difficult to implement. So I think it's a great report. Thank you very much.
Thank
Anita?
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was I echo what Donna said. Very good report. But just a couple of questions. Had you done any kind of analysis into potential energy from waste, not at the Smith landfill, but perhaps on a regional basis? And then the second question I have is, I've often heard that Canadian garbage is shipped to Michigan, and I'm just wondering if any of our local, not specific to the Smith landfill, but if any of the local garbage is being shipped to Michigan. So one is energy from waste, and the second is Canadian garbage being shipped to Michigan?
Yeah, so energy from waste, there is the one facility in Clarington that currently operates for York Durham. And I think there are a couple other private energy from waste facilities in the municipality, or sorry, in the province. I think it might be something that municipalities will look at in the future, especially larger ones that are trying to figure out how to manage their waste that is being shipped to Michigan. And hopefully they will solve that problem for all the smaller municipalities. There are a decreasing number of years of landfill capacity left in Ontario. So it is definitely something that is on the radar, especially for larger waste generators in the province. And in terms of sending waste to Michigan, I'm not sure that any local municipalities are doing that. I think most smaller and local municipalities have the capacity to manage their current waste locally. But definitely there are some municipalities that do send their waste to the States and Ontario.
Thank you. Jerry?
Is that Jerry or Sherry?
Jerry.
Yeah, sorry, my space, like Mike Richardson, my space bar wasn't working. Thanks, Heather. Two quick questions. One, was there a rough draft provided? No report delivered.
Sorry, rough draft?
Yes. Was there a rough draft done up? And then when was the final report presented to us? Or
Okay,
handed?
yeah. I believe the rough draft was provided sometime mid-October, and it was finalized in the last few weeks.
Thank you, Jerry. Sherry?
Everything's been said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had a couple of questions. One directed at you, Heather, and then one at staff. So this is an unusual business line, in that what you're attempting to do is decrease the amount of business that you do, because you're trying to divert as much as you can, and the more you can keep out of the landfill, the better off you are. So it's not the intuitive way you would approach a business. Having said that, one of the challenges or opportunities, depending on how you look at it, is that Bensford landfill site is, if I understand correctly from your report and from other information, that they are going to significantly increase their tipping fees. I wonder if you could just touch on that for a moment, about how that may want to guide us in Selwyn.
Yeah, so initially, to be honest, we weren't aware of the tipping fee increases, and regionally there is higher tip fee rate. We were going to look at a recommendation to work with the city on an increase. The cost of managing waste is more expensive if you look at the life cycle, as I spoke to earlier. So, increasing the tip fees to make them cover the costs of the operation, the full life of the operation, does make sense. And yes, typically people are going to seek the lowest cost alternative for disposing of their waste. So the township will have to be aware of that, managing their waste stream until, or their landfill site, sorry, until their rates are sort of similar to the Bensford landfill, because there is risk that people are going to come from other areas and try and dispose of their waste for a lesser rate if they can.
That is going to be an issue that we're going to have to manage. The second question is to whoever from staff want to address this. In this report, in the previous one, and I believe in the fire department one as well. In all of them, there's a recommendation or a common recommendation about automation, about going to online payments or credit cards or etc. We just went through a pretty extensive piece of work within the township of automating our client services in terms of providing more options. And I'm just wondering, and I don't know, maybe Lane could speak to this, whether all of that work that we've already done and the investment that we've made can be used to assist in fulfilling some of those recommendations without having to start from square one.
Yes, to you, Mr. Chair. In many areas, we have seen success in financial services software in terms of some of the changes that we've made. But in the majority of the instances that you're referring to in these service delivery reviews, the software is specialized. So the landfill site in particular, some of those recommendations with respect to internet access, the ability to possibly export and then upload, that would be something we would investigate, and therefore we may be able to have some savings there because of the work that we've done already. But in many instances, the software is specialized, and there isn't one provider that provides every possible bit of software that we're going to use as a municipality. So with respect to for instance, the building permit tracking system, that's a very specialized one that council's made some steps on already. With respect to the landfill, once again, a different type of software that not every municipality has. And with respect to recreation booking software, that's something that to date, we haven't been able to, based on what we know, be able to find anything that fully integrates into our financial services package. So it's a challenge, and that's why in many instances, these are recommendations to continue to look at options in the future.
Yeah, well, clearly something we'll have to talk about as we dive into implementation of these reports. Okay, well, Heather, David, thank you very much for your presentation. Very much appreciated. A great piece of work, and I know we have a long-standing relationship with your firm, so thank you for what you've done.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, we will move on to our next report, which I believe is water and wastewater, if I've got that correctly. In terms of order, we're going to do the fire department last. Is that correct, Angie?
That's correct.
Oh, good. Okay, and who do we have here that's going to speak to the water and wastewater service delivery review?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's Doug Thompson from Aureus Solutions.
Hi, Doug.
I'm not going to be using my video today. As a result of some tests earlier, we had significant storm roll through just north of Coburg yesterday, and as a result, I find myself without power at home for the last 16 hours, and it's not scheduled to be restored until 8 p.m. on November the 18th. So I'm at a satellite location today for the presentation, but happy to be here.
We appreciate the effort, Doug.
No problem. No problem. I have a generator in my back of the truck that's going to connect later this evening at home. So I'll just put the presentation up. Can everyone see the presentation?
I don't see it. I don't think we don't have it up there. I don't know whether somebody
Okay.
from the township can help.
Just one moment. How about now?
No, still we don't see it.
No.
Hi, Doug. It's Tanya here. Oh, it looks like it might have just warped.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Great.
Okay. Very
Yep,
good.
Doug, thank you.
Once again, thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to present the Water and Wastewater Service Delivery Review Report to you today. Mayor, as you mentioned earlier, today's presentation is just meant to be a very high-level overview of the report, touching on some of the highlights and some of the particulars of that report. Joining me today is my colleague Peter Simcisco from Watson and Associates, and Watson subcontracted with Aureus to do the financial component of the overview of the options that are presented and some of the recommendations. From the standpoint of the report, one of the aspects that was looked at originally in the report is some of the current issues and trends within the water and wastewater sector. Over the last many years, couple of decades, since 2001 in particular, the events of Walkerton, legislation and regulations changed dramatically in the industry as a result of the tragedy in Walkerton. Fortunately, today, what we find is that the extent of legislation has slowed with the implementation of some of the source water protection regulations that are now in place. The majority of those 123 recommendations out of the Walkerton report have now been implemented, and it's fairly stable environment from the standpoint of legislation and regulations. From the standpoint of governance, that's really what is for Council's consideration going forward. In other words, how do they envision and how do they see the water and wastewater services being delivered so that they are comfortable with the delivery as well as ensuring that they are providing the best service and best level of service to the residents of Lakefield and Woodland Acres. Of late, actually since 2010, there was legislation brought into place that required municipalities providing water and wastewater services the mandate to ensure that their systems were financially sustainable. The Water Opportunities Act was the particular legislation that was put in place, And what that suggests is that municipalities need to look forward thinking to not only the current operating costs, but also the replacement, rehabilitation, and new installations and replacement of equipment going forward. So both the operating side of things as well as the capital side of things. Obviously, in alignment with capital planning and capital spending is to understand what your assets are and to put in place a long-term plan for those replacements once they reach their end of life cycle. And of course, associated with asset management is ensuring that you are maintaining, repairing, and rehabilitating your equipment and your processes accordingly to maximize those life cycle of the assets. So those are the main sector issues of today, and of course those should be all considered when making decisions on how to provide the service going forward. In the water and wastewater sector, there are really three main options for servicing and providing those services to ratepayers. The first would be a municipal operating agency, and there are a number of ways that can be provided by the municipality. The most common by far is a municipal department within the municipalities. So in this particular case, as we'll see further in the presentation, one of the proposed options going forward is a municipal department of Selwyn Township falling under the Public Works domain. The second would be a regional water provider, and there are 16 regional governments within the province of Ontario. Those are driven by the province themselves, and at this point in time, there is no driver for the province to look to increase or modify how those regional governments work. In a regional government structure, typically the upper tier, being the region, would treat and treat both the water and wastewater components and provide that at a wholesale basis to the lower tier municipalities within that region. Those regional governments primarily are in South and Southwestern Ontario, and in Selwyn Township, as we know, there's no regional governments at the moment. The third is the structure that's in place currently for providing water and wastewater services, utilizing an external operating agency. In this particular case, it's Peterborough Utilities Services, who have been providing the operating and management contract for Selwyn Township for the last 20 years. There are other opportunities. The Ontario Clean Water Agency is by far the largest external operating agency in the province, as well as a smaller number of private operating agencies. Of these three main classifications of options, we selected two to do an analysis of, one being continuing with an external operating agency, as currently is the case, and the second or alternative option would be an in-house delivery, again, under the Public Works Department. As mentioned, Peterborough Utilities Services have been providing these services on behalf of Selwyn Township under contract for the last 20 years, and by all conversations, it's been beneficial for both parties, the arrangement that's been in place, in particular for Selwyn Township during that rapid change of legislation and regulatory change. Difficult for smaller municipalities to manage that degree of change in that shorter time frame. So it was beneficial, and with contract management and operations, one of the driving forces is obviously the terms of the contract relationship. And when we reviewed the current Peterborough Utility Services contract with Selwyn, there was a number of gaps that were identified that we can discuss. The primary gap from our perspective was the reporting component. Again, having a third party oversee the operations and management. One of the keys for council and staff is to be frequently reported and openly, publicly reported on the current operations, the maintenance activities that are ongoing, the continuous improvement and innovative initiatives that are undertaken, as well as the financial component from the standpoint of the terms of the contract. That currently, in our opinion, can be improved on, and any future negotiations with Peterborough Utilities should include those components of trying to make the contract language a little more mutually beneficial for those inputs to be driven through Selwyn Township staff as well as council, so that they can maintain current with the current operating initiatives. The second gap identified was the capital planning side, which was mentioned earlier. Capital planning is important to be able to manage your limited resources and to make informed decisions on capital upgrades. And again, because of the nature of the contract, it's believed that that could be improved on, that Selwyn Township staff could have a little more involvement and a little more role in that capital planning side of things. And the third gap identified was the innovation and continuous improvement efforts. The alternative option that was looked at was bringing the contract operations and management internally under a division of Public Works. We looked at some comparators and some industry standards from the standpoint of staffing and the requirement there. And ultimately that led to some of the inputs into the financial analysis of the two options, as well as we wanted to ensure that we were comparing apples to apples from the standpoint of the services currently being provided by Peterborough Utility Services and compare those with what would be required internally. Those roles or responsibilities currently are routine operation and maintenance of the water plant, as well as the distribution, the lagoon system, as well as the collection system. Secondly, the management or administration of that operation. And lastly, the regulatory, ensuring that regulatory requirements, reporting, and others to provincial body are done in a timely and effective pattern. I'm going to turn it over to Peter now to discuss the financial analysis component of those two options, one being the Peterborough Utility Services contract versus the in-house or proposed in-house operations.
Perfect. Thank you, Doug. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So the financial analysis that was undertaken as part of this review assessed the potential impact of switching to the alternative service delivery model, namely the township management and operation of the water and wastewater systems, as was outlined by Doug on the previous slide. The financial impact was measured against the township's 2020 budgets, which are based on the current operating contract with Peterborough Utility Services. The assessment was predominantly focused on operating costs because the capital aspects of service delivery would be largely unchanged as a result of a different or alternative service delivery model. And so, as detailed in the report, each component of the operating budget was reviewed to determine where adjustments would be made under the alternative service option. And those adjustments included the removal of operating agreement costs with Peterborough Utility Services under the in-house management model. It also included additional staffing costs, including the salaries and benefits, as well as training costs, provision for on-call premiums and overtime pay related to those positions. Another adjustment would be the addition of operating expenses such as electricity and chemicals, equipment, as well as materials, all of which are currently captured under the operating agreement with Peterborough Utility Services. I would also note that the analysis also included an estimate of the savings that the township could achieve on items such as electricity and chemicals and materials if those resources were managed more directly by township staff, and with there being a greater incentive to seek operational efficiencies that could result in these savings. And then finally, the addition of operating costs related to 2 additional vehicles that the township would need to support the utility function, including fuel servicing, as well as insurance. Now, finally, in terms of capital, as I noted earlier, the analysis was premised on the understanding that the capital aspects of service would be largely unchanged. And I think we've lost the presentation there, but I'll speak to it, and hopefully Doug can bring that up shortly. But so the capital aspects were omitted because they would be largely unchanged as part of the alternative service delivery model. And this is because the capital costs are really related to the physical infrastructure supporting the provision of water and wastewater services, none of which would be affected under the in-house management model. The only additional capital costs are the annual life cycle replacement costs related to 2 additional vehicles, and a provision for that annual life cycle cost was included in the analysis. So I still don't have the presentation up, but that's okay. I'll keep speaking to it for now. So the second slide in here was just summarizing the findings of the financial analysis. And so based on the various inputs that I summarized, that we had summarized on the previous slide, the alternative service delivery model would potentially provide a net financial benefit to the township's ratepayers. The total billing recovery under the alternative service delivery model would be approximately $50,400 lower than the requirement identified in the township's 2020 budgets. And so that represents a savings of approximately 2.1% relative to the status quo. One important thing to mention, though, is that there would be a transition period required to allow the township to undertake preparations for potentially bringing the management of these services in-house. And what we've also recognized is that the township would incur costs during that transition period, in addition to the contract costs with Peterborough Utility Services. These additional costs would largely encompass staffing costs, so starting to recruit and train the additional staff positions before taking over the management of the systems, as well as accreditation costs and setup of workspaces, as well as the purchase of the 2 additional vehicles that were mentioned earlier. So in total, the township would likely incur approximately $201,000 of costs during this transition period. But then based on the annual operating cost savings that were identified earlier of, again, about $50,400 annually, the township would potentially recover these costs within 4 years of the transition. And so in other words, the township could expect to see a return on that initial investment over the transition period within about 4 years, and that those savings would potentially translate into savings to the ratepayers. And so that summarizes the financial analysis. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Doug to summarize the conclusions and recommendations.
Doug here.
Tanya from the town. Can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry, my battery ran out.
Are you good to go? I think you,
Sorry, I'm good to go. Yes.
okay. Go ahead. Peter just finished up his portion.
Thanks very much.
So Doug, we're getting a lot of background noise.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Apologize, Mayor and Council. Unfortunate. Once again, as Peter just finished the financial review, out of the review, as well as some of the options that were reviewed, we would present or suggest 3 particular recommendations. Firstly, that the township engage with Peterborough Utility Services, as well as some other external contract providers, Ontario Clean Water Agency being one, in seeking competitive bids for the forthcoming renewal of the contract, which is up for renewal January 21st, 2022. Secondly, if those results, and if that is the direction the council chooses, engage with Peterborough Utilities to address the contract language that was identified as gaps in the current contract. And if council and mayor and council so choose, the possibility of integrating the water and wastewater operations into Selwyn Township is a viable option that could be explored.
Okay.
And,
You done, Doug? Or?
And thank you, Mayor and Council. And we are now available for questions.
Doug, I'm going to ask council to ask questions, but while you're getting the questions, if you could put yourself on mute, that would be great. That's super. Okay, colleagues, who has a question? Sherry, why don't you start? And I can't see everybody, but I can see Sherry. So Sherry, go ahead.
All right, so I think it's good to look at all the options that we have and pick what's best for us. I know that Aqua is used by some other municipalities in the county, albeit they have smaller systems than we do. I have a question for Lane or Janice. I thought that with Woodland Acres that we were bound with Peterborough PUS. That's not the case?
Janice, Lane?
I wouldn't say we're bound in terms of how we manage our portion, the infrastructure that we own. Certainly the water and comes from the city of Peterborough and the wastewater goes to the city of Peterborough. And that wouldn't change.
Okay. And whatever we choose, it doesn't obviate the fact that council members are personally responsible for the water that is delivered to our residents, correct?
That is correct. The standard of care applies whether or not you operate it as a municipality or you contract it out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Donna has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. Through you to
Doug?
person that did the financial analysis, Peter. You said that there would be approximately after 4 years a 2.1% savings, but only part of our municipality has the water and sewer delivery system. The rest of the municipality have wells and septic. And I was just wondering if you factored that in, would all the ratepayers be paying for the trucks and the staff and all the extra things we'd need to do an in-house program?
Thank you for the question. So the analysis only looked at the impact on those that pay water and wastewater rates. So when we're referring to ratepayers in the analysis and the 2.1% savings annually, it's in reference to the people or businesses that are paying water and wastewater rates.
So all the expenses to set it up wouldn't be spread across all the ratepayers?
That's correct. They're only recovered. So water and wastewater utilities are designed to be financially self-sustaining. So there is not a cross subsidy from the general tax levy to those services.
Okay. And I had one other question, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, I know the water system at the Ennismore Robert E. Young Recreation Complex, it is a water treatment small water treatment facility. Why wasn't that looked into? Possibly staff, because they've likely told the consultants what to do.
Yeah,
I
so
can
that
answer that.
wasn't,
Oh, go ahead, Janice.
I was just going to say that wasn't part of the scope of the work of the project because we were just looking at a large residential drinking water system. So the Ennismore system is governed by different legislation and we use different staff at this point to manage those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Anita, Jerry, did you have comments? No, okay, I just, because this is what we're really gonna, there are really two things, and if Peter or Doug, correct me if I'm wrong. There are really two thrusts of what you've said. So number one is, you're saying at a minimum, you've had a 20-year contract. It's time that you take a deep dive into that. Take a look at the language, take a look at the transparency provisions, take a look at how you deal with that, which is probably a self-evident recommendation after 20 years in the same contract. And particularly inside of that, the planning horizon for capital expenditures, which I think you highlight is pretty short. Or what you would want to look at doing is considering taking it in-house, which provides over a period of time a savings of around 2%, but which has to be weighed against our ability as counselors to exercise their duty of care. Is that a brief synopsis of what you're saying we need to get our minds around as a council?
Mayor, I would agree totally. You summarized it perfectly.
Good. Thank you, Doug. And thank you, Peter. So that's, colleagues, when we get back to doing the dive, that's what we're going to look at in terms of this one. So Peter and Doug, we appreciate your assistance and work, and Doug particularly in terms of dealing with adversity to make sure that you're able to do your presentation. We appreciate that, and so thank you very much. And we'll go on to our next presentation.
And thank you. I apologize for the technical issues.
Not to worry, we're all dealing with it. Okay, colleagues, we'll go on to our fourth report, which is on our fire department. And who's going to be doing that presentation? Claudio, is that you?
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Can you see me?
Nope.
How about now?
Now I can. Yep.
Good afternoon. So yes, my name's Claudio Covelli, and I'm a senior fire and emergency services team member at Dillon. On behalf of Janny Pape, who was our project manager for the project, I extend her apologies. She's on a leave and could not be here, so I will do the presentation. So I have over 35 years of experience, industry experience, and I've done both the internal reviews for both the draft and final report for the project. So I am familiar with the project. Now, the slide, can you see my slide deck, or I gotta share my screen, I guess?
That's right. You'll have to share your screen at the bottom of your Zoom window. Yep, there you go.
I'm almost there. Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yeah, we can see the screen. It's still in working mode. So if you want to change the slideshow to start from the beginning.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one, sorry. I was on the PDF. I will go here. How's that?
That's perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so our review of the fire services was a focus of the organizational structure and the service delivery demands of the municipality, including potentially looking at alternative service delivery models and technology and perhaps innovative solutions that might improve efficiency. So in terms of the presentation, I'm just going to highlight some of the legislation, regulations, and standards that are apply to a municipal fire department and the municipal fire planning. A little bit about the study process, but the bulk of the presentation will be around recommendations and a little bit of context around each of those as we go. So within the province of Ontario, the relevant legislation for the operation of a fire department is contained in the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. And in addition to promoting how one does prevention and public safety, fire safety, the Act also governs the authority of the Ontario Fire Code. So that's how the Ontario Fire Code is regulated. But this is the principal piece of legislation for operating a fire department in Ontario. Recently, the Ontario government passed Ontario Regulation 378/18, which is a community risk assessment regulation. So it requires that all municipalities develop a community risk assessment prior to July 1st, 2024. And to use that risk assessment in the assessment to inform decisions about the provisions of fire protection services within the municipality. So really the community risk assessment is now a core component of developing the in-depth analysis of a community's fire risks through this comprehensive process. And they lay out 9 mandatory community profiles that you have to step through in conducting the risk assessment to get a comprehensive picture. And so what we're seeing in the industry now is a trend that municipalities, recognizing that 2024 is out there, they're proactively taking measures to complete these in advance and in conjunction with the fire master plan to really set the stage for managing fire risk and the demand and needs and circumstances of a municipality through that process. And what we're suggesting here is that there would be value in the township undertaking this community risk assessment for exactly those reasons. There's also the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which applies to an employer that has to take every reasonable precaution, reasonable in the circumstances to for the protection of workers. But as it relates to the fire service, they go on to identify a Section 21 advisory committee that identifies the roles and responsibilities to issue these kinds of guidance notes to address firefighter safety in Ontario. So these guidances, provide for a municipality to identify and articulate policies and procedures, operating guidelines, and to have those that are consistent with the Section 21 guidance notes for the fire services. The Ontario government has also put out a fire protection model based on 3 lines of defense, with the first priority put on public education and prevention. Better not for it not to happen at all in the first instance. Secondly, to look at standards and enforcement of those standards, fire codes, etc. And then third and lastly, to ensure to look at the emergency response side of it. This has been ingrained in virtually all of the work that we do now, that we look at them in this priority. But, of course, the suppression side, the emergency response side, it can be that fail-safe and key part of the whole package as well. And so to some of the industry standards, particularly as it relates to suppression, NFPA, which is a well-regarded industry organization that essentially puts out a large number of standards and guidelines to help municipalities and fire departments operate effectively and efficiently. And NFPA 1720 is the standard for emergency response for a predominantly volunteer fire department, such as Selwyn. So basically, this first recommendation simply highlights that the township should assess its suppression capabilities in relation to the 1710 benchmark, but by doing that as part of a more comprehensive community risk assessment and fire master plan process that really will set the stage for the needs and circumstances and solutions and resources required to deliver within your needs and circumstances. I'm not going to go through each of these, but this is just a listing of just some of the NFPA standards. These are focused on qualifications of roles within a department, but they go on. There's others for dispatching and just a whole range of functions that a municipal fire department has to operate. So that's really just for illustration purposes. As part of the study process, we undertook a fair bit of data collection in order for us to begin that assessment. But then it also included a significant amount of internal stakeholder consultation. We did telephone interviews and lots of follow-up correspondence with key members of the municipality that we thought had a perspective on the review that we were undertaking. And so you can see the listing of the folks that we spoke with. And we were really probing and trying to get behind some of the data by talking with individuals with knowledge to understand the strengths, weaknesses, some of the opportunities and the challenges of the department, but focused on the organizational structure and the service delivery demand. So it's clearly not a full fire master plan, so it was really sort of a bit targeted. We also conducted online surveys with the volunteer firefighters, and this was requested by the township. We developed the questionnaire in consultation with the human resource coordinator, and that was informed by some of the exit interview questions of departing volunteers. So we were trying to target and try to get a perspective from the volunteer firefighters as input to the process as well. So as we get deeper into the recommendations here, one of the areas that we paid attention to was the organizational structure. And based on the research that we did through the course of the study and feedback, it certainly appeared that the roles and responsibility of the assistant deputy fire chief was very similar in representing a senior officer position within the department. So in our view, I think there was certainly evidence to warrant giving serious consideration to structuring the department under 2 deputy fire chiefs and laying out the roles and responsibilities of each in that kind of operating framework. We also identified the need for some additional resources related to training. And so as part of the review and articulating the roles and responsibilities of the deputies, I think it's worth looking at the training resources within the department as well. And in a couple of slides, I'll talk about a couple of the options that we identified for how that might be achieved. We all had a couple of other recommendations targeted at resources. The municipality currently does training for volunteer firefighters that, to make sure they're qualified to drive a firefighting apparatus or operating the pump. With turnover, I think what we're highlighting here is that you need to continue to do that, to focus on it, to make sure that you've got the appropriate number of trained personnel in each department, in each station, to ensure that you always have a qualified person ready to leave the station. The recommendation 4 simply highlights that the municipality should really ensure that each member is capable of performing the duties assigned to them and required of them, and to ensure that the appropriate capabilities are there, whether it's training or physical. As it related to personnel, there was an area that we identified that had to do with ensuring that hiring, promotion, and disciplinary action of firefighters is free from any bias. And really what we're focusing on is having specific policies to ensure that family members are not involved in each other's, whether it's hiring or promotion or whatever, and that they don't report to each other in any kind of reporting relationship. So trying to keep those separate, trying to keep the process free from bias. Currently, the HR coordinator and CAO are involved in hiring and promotion. We identified that it would be good for the HR coordinator to be involved in any disciplinary action, so that there is that sort of independence and no bias from within if there are any of those other relationships. So it was really focused on those sorts of areas. The department, the township, has a number of agreements that and bylaws that basically shape the existing fire service delivery that happens. There's an establishing and regulating bylaw that the municipality passed. There's agreements with neighboring municipalities for the provision of fire services. There's a medical tiered response agreement that dictates when the municipality responds to medical calls. and there's a cost recovery bylaw. All very typical. All municipalities should have these, and of course you do. As it relates to the establishing and regulating bylaw, we have this as a recommendation to kind of revisit this. Once you've done the community risk assessment and fire master plan, there may very well be things coming out of that that will influence what's in the establishing and regulating bylaw. And that could be structure, that could be services provided or not provided. But it's certainly warranted that you have a look at this once the if you get to doing the fire master plan and community risk assessment. We've also highlighted that there's certainly evidence that there's significant workload related to the medical response side of what the department does. And we're highlighting that it would be prudent and perhaps even necessary to do a more detailed review of when they respond, how they respond, and are they having a positive impact on the outcome of the incident? Not to say that we're trying to say that they have to do less, but if the assessment shows that you can reduce when they respond without any material impact to the outcome of the incident, then I think it's worth having a look at. And so that's what we're highlighting there. We're also highlighting that you may want to look at the cost recovery opportunities. We identified some, and I'm not going to list them, but we identified some that the municipality isn't recovering for, that some municipalities do. And so you may want to look at the implications of that and perhaps add to that. On the administrative side, the department currently uses a number of software, Firehouse for data management, for example. But part of the consultation and discussions we've had with staff is that there are certainly some processes that are still more manual than perhaps they could be, and they could be more efficient. And I think using the software a little more to its fullest extent could improve some of that efficiency. You have some of this software. There are modules that aren't being used fully, or processes that could be made more efficient. The department does a number of fire prevention and public education activities and services. Based on the experience, particularly so far with Ontario Regulation 378-18, the community risk assessment, that I think once having completed that community risk assessment, what that typically leads to is being a little more targeted with where you spend your fire prevention and public education resources. And so I think completing that will inform that process. I highlighted earlier that there's a need for some additional resources to sustain the current volunteer training program and provide that ongoing monitoring of the competencies of the folks and the volunteers in the department, and complying with legislation. This is simply a table that highlights the current qualifications, training and qualifications of the staff at each fire station. And then this table simply summarizes the officers assigned to each of the fire stations with their current qualifications. What we're highlighting here is that there are a number of designated officers within the department who, at a minimum, haven't attained NFPA 1021 level 1 qualification. So really we're saying that this should be considered a priority, because this is that minimum qualification to be considered a qualified supervisor under the Ontario Health and Safety Act. So again, sort of putting some priority on that. As it relates to the how to do it, we identified a couple of options in terms of how to get to the enhanced training. One was to identify volunteer firefighters at each station who may have an interest in training or a background in adult education that might want to take a more active role in facilitating some of this training. So basically distributing it. The other option is to transition to a full-time training quarter, and that may be done incrementally over a period of time where you increase the hours, but you get to the point of a full-time position. One is, you know, an assured resource, fully trained. The other is more distributed, takes more effort at training, but I think it's worth municipality having a look at to see whether one or the other of those better suits your needs. We also included a municipal peer comparison. We identified, I think, about 5 municipalities that are similar in nature, composite or volunteer predominantly, and just to look at a number of things. And the report has more information, but some highlights were that Selwyn has a higher than average number of seniors, lower average number of youths, slightly lower average population density, greater number of dwelling units, and a slightly lower average operating costs. So that's really just to sort of benchmark the municipality a little bit. And again, there's more in the report. We also looked to see what sort of alternative service delivery models are out there that might be applicable to Selwyn. And so there are a number of predominantly volunteer fire departments that have shared resources in a number of ways, and that may be the fire chief, it may be more than the fire chief, a training officer, community emergency management coordinator. So there are a number of ways of potentially reducing the cost of providing the service by sharing the resources across multiple municipalities. And so they provided some examples of where that occurs. We also looked at the historical recruitment and retention statistics that the department keeps. Turnover is typically a fairly challenging part of managing a predominantly volunteer force. What was good and surprising a little bit was that Selwyn's is actually quite good, 6.1%. It was the annual average turnover, where we're more typically seeing 10 and even as high as 20%. So your turnover rate is good. And for the most part, over the last, whatever that is, 7, 8 years, have had fairly good success in recruiting the vacancies as they occur, because even with on average 6%, and it's ranged from 2.2% to 9.1%, there is turnover, there's staff that you got to hire, and you generally have done reasonably well at recruiting, but certainly in 2019 and certainly in other municipalities, sometimes recruiting can be a challenge, and so the report includes some recommendations on how one can do recruiting, enhance your recruiting efforts, because there are sort of a couple of key impacts from that. Clearly, the need to train additional staff as they come in is an issue, and if you're not at full strength, it could even impact your service delivery in that not enough firefighters are present or responding to meet the suppression requirements. So so there's a couple of recommendations targeted at ensuring that you've got a succession plan, and ensuring that you adopt recruitment and retention strategies that will enhance what you're currently doing. And that could be looking at benefits, it could be where you recruit, so the number of areas that we had targeted. And so that really is highlights of the recommendations, process, regulations, and legislation that govern the operation of the fire department, and I do my best to answer any questions.
Thanks, Claudio. I'm trying to see can we take the presentation off the screen so I can see everybody?
Sure, let's see if I can figure out how to do that.
There we go. Okay, everybody's up. Who has a question? Colleagues? Jerry?
Thank you. My connection's showing a little unstable here, so if I do get cut off, I will call back. Thank you, Claudio. I've got two questions, one comment. The question I've got, one of them, with regards to the motor vehicle and cost recovery there, where do we stand versus the peer group, if you will, or overall in your experience? How far behind are we?
Yeah, I wouldn't say you're necessarily behind, but we certainly identified some areas, use of big equipment. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there were certainly 3 or 4 specific items that we identified that you weren't charging for that other municipalities are, and you could look to consider. It's always a trade-off between what you charge for, how much you're going to recover, how often do you do that versus whatever inconvenience might be perceived by doing that. But there are opportunities that we had identified.
All right, thank you. In regards to the not having family in a supervisory role, and speaking from experience many years ago with my wife, a lot of hot dinners that were pretty damn cold when I was in a supervisory position there. So I'm a firm believer in the best team on the ice at all times. So would you suggest then that we're careful where we put people? Or again, I want the best team on the ice every day. So how do you suggest we work around that, especially in a small community?
Yeah, there's no question it's a challenge, and we've run into this, and certainly you're not unique. But wherever possible, if there isn't a direct working relationship, primarily or most significantly as it relates to promotions or any disciplinary action, presumably they're already hired. But if they're not hired, even potentially looking at if the only way that this works is that they have to report to a family member, I think giving serious consideration as to whether that hire should happen. If there's a trade-off there, obviously you have the access to an individual, but if hiring that individual creates some challenges within the department, I think you have to really weigh whether that's worthwhile. And I guess what we're highlighting is that it's best to stay away from it. If you can put enough risk management around it that others take the lead as it relates to promotions or disciplinary action, if that could occur, you may be able to mitigate it. But I think you want to do it with your eyes open and have a mitigation plan if you do it.
All right, thank you. And one final question: when was the final report to the township?
When was it provided to the township?
Yeah, final report.
Late last week.
Thank you.
Okay, Donna or Anita or Sherry, I don't see your hands. Okay, I'm just gonna, just before we wrap it up, just a question for you. So the community risk assessment plan is now a requirement, which I guess we got to do by 2022.
2024.
2024, okay. Does that take the place of a fire master plan?
No, it actually informs the fire master plan. So there's 9 community profiles in a community risk assessment that will look at building stock, geography, just a whole range of things that really describe the municipality and what there is to protect and what the risk is. And then based on that, you would go about planning your fire master plan by looking at prevention, education. What are the things you should put in place that targets those risks that you've identified in the community risk assessment?
Okay, so I may be out of date here because something could have occurred in the period that I wasn't on council, but we did a fire master plan, and this is to staff. I think we tabled it in 2014. If we use the CRA to inform a fire master plan in 2024, are we going 10 years without updating our fire master plan, or was something done in the 2014-18 period? Terry's shaking her head, so I'm thinking not, but so are we at risk by having a 10-year without doing a fire master plan?
if the question is for me, what I would say is you don't have to wait 10 years. And I think in the implementation part of the report, we have laid out some timelines. I mean, you're going to get close to it one way or the other. We're already at the end of 2020, but you could begin to look at doing risk assessment sooner than 2024 and have a fire master plan certainly before the end of 10 years. For a municipality this size, if not a lot has changed, we typically would say do one every 5 years, but for a municipality like Selwyn, 5 to 10 is not out of the question. We've certainly seen that in other places.
Okay, when there's a lot that as a council we're going to have to get our minds around, but I just want to ask you the training. I think you called it the 1021 training, the fundamental piece there, and you mentioned that we're having to get more folks qualified in that. Are we at any risk with that qualification not being there now?
Well, it's a requirement of the Occupational Health and Safety Act to have competent supervisors. And one of the way that you would be measured as to whether you had a competent supervisor in the fire department is if they had training to the minimum qualifications for that position. So it's perhaps a long-winded way of saying maybe if something were to happen on a shift of someone that wasn't qualified, there's potentially a risk there that you want to try to mitigate sooner rather than later.
Okay, Claudio, thank you very much for your presentation and to everybody for theirs. So we'll just move on, colleagues. There's a proposed recommendation. I'm just going to read it, and then if we're comfortable with it, that the draft service delivery review reports prepared by, all of them listed, as part of the provincial municipal modernization program received for information, and that the final reports be posted on the township website and provided to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in accordance with their funding agreement, which I believe is December 1st, and that staff bring back a report on December the 8th outlining the implementation plan for the recommendations. That's what I spoke about at the beginning of the session. Do we have a mover? Anita, were you good? Somebody wants to second that? Donna? All those in favor, just stick up your hand. That is carried. Okay, is there anybody registered for a question? I don't believe so. Just running through the rest of the agenda. Okay, we have no municipal officers and staff reports, either for direction or for information. There is no correspondence. There's no Peterborough County report. There are no committee reports. There are no petitions. There are no portfolio updates. Is there any other unfinished business? I don't think in this context that there is. And I need a motion for a confirming bylaw. Sherry, seconded by Anita. All those in favor? Carried. And Jerry is a motion for adjournment, seconded by Anita. All those in favor? Great. Colleagues, we're done. 5:02, very disciplined group of individuals today. Thank you. And Jerry, did you have your hand up to say something? Or okay. Yes, very good. Very good. Okay, Jerry's got the hang of some new technology now. We're in for it for the next little while. Okay, colleagues, bye-bye. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.